The winter night was quiet enough to hear your own breath, quiet enough that the smallest sound should have slipped away unnoticed. But the words that drifted through the air that night didn't slip anywhere. They struck like a blade of cold steel. "Sir, where do kids go when nobody wants them anymore?" Adrian Wolf froze mid-step. The CEO, who'd negotiated billion-dollar mergers without blinking, suddenly couldn't remember how to breathe. He turned slowly toward the shelter gate, the old sign half buried under snow, the chain lock rattling in the wind like a cruel reminder. And there, curled beneath the broken street lamp outside Harlem Haven Shelter, sat a little girl, thin coat, trembling hands, eyes too old for someone so young. That single question had shattered the night. And him. Her name, he'd soon learn, was Mira. But at that moment, she was just a small silhouette hugging a torn backpack, as if it were the last warm thing in her life. "What? What did you say?" Adrian asked, stepping closer. Mira looked up. Her voice was soft but steady in a way no child's should ever have to be. "I waited here because they said this place helps kids, but the door never opened. I thought maybe I wasn't wanted." The words hit Adrian with more force than any boardroom ambush ever had. Before he could speak, a harsh beam of light slashed across them. "Hey, you can't stay here," a security guard barked, stomping toward them. "We've had complaints. She needs to move along." Mira flinched so hard she pressed herself against the iron gate. It took everything in Adrian not to grab the guard by the collar. "She's a child," Adrian said, voice low but sharp. "Lower the flashlight." The guard sneered. "This area's private property. The last CEO cut funding months ago. This place is dead. We don't need loitering." Adrian stepped in front of Mira, shoulders squared. "I said lower it." The guard hesitated. Something in Adrian's tone, a warning, a promise, made him back off, mumbling curses as he disappeared into the snow. When the light faded, Mira slowly loosened her grip on her backpack. Adrian knelt to her level, aware of how fragile she looked in the cold. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. She shrugged. "Long enough for the snow to cover my shoes." He looked down. The soles were wet through. Her toes were red. Her lips were trembling. "Why this shelter?" "Who told you to come?" he pressed gently. Mira reached into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled sheet of paper. A single sentence was written in shaky handwriting. "Go to Harlem Haven. The doors stay open." Adrian felt the blood drain from his face. 6 months earlier, he had personally signed the order discontinuing Harlem Haven's funding. Unnecessary community programs, the CFO had called it. Low return rate. Adrian remembered the spreadsheet, the recommendations, the signatures. He had no idea the decision had a face, or a pair of small frozen hands gripping a false promise. He cleared his throat. "Where's your mother, Mira?" Her gaze fell. She hugged the backpack again, tighter this time, as if she were holding a secret too heavy to say out loud. "I don't know," she whispered. "She said she'd come back for me." Silence sat between them, heavier than the winter air. Adrian drew in a slow breath. "Do you have her phone number?" "Any family?" "No." Mira shook her head. "Just this." She opened the backpack again, this time more carefully, and revealed a small stuffed bunny missing one ear, a string of hospital bracelets, and a folded photograph. In the picture, Mira clung to a smiling woman with tired eyes. "She told me not to be scared," Mira murmured. "She said, people help kids like me." Adrian swallowed hard. "Mira, when did you see her last?" A police siren wailed faintly down the block. Mira jolted, eyes suddenly wide. "Please don't let them take me again," she begged. "Please. I'll be good. I'll be quiet. I won't bother anybody ever again." Adrian's chest tightened, an unfamiliar, painful pull he hadn't felt since childhood, when he himself had once sat under a staircase waiting for someone who never came back. He had buried that memory deep, but the sight of Mira sitting alone in the snow pulled it all back with brutal clarity. "No one is taking you anywhere," he said, firmly surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "Not tonight." Mira hesitated, searching his face, trying to decide whether an adult's words were worth trusting. "You don't have to be afraid," he added. "I'm staying right here." The wind howled through the alleyway, rattling the locked shelter gate. Adrian glanced at it at the place that should have been a refuge, but was now nothing more than a dark, empty building with his signature stamped on its closure. Mira's question returned like a whisper carried on the winter air. Where do kids go when nobody wants them anymore? Adrian stood brushing snow from his coat. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's get you warm first." But Mira didn't move. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Sometimes grown-ups say things they don't mean." He crouched again, lowering his voice. "Mira, I've made a lot of wrong decisions in my life, but leaving you here tonight won't be one of them." For a moment, only the wind moved. Then Mira reached out slow, uncertain, and placed her hand in his. Adrian closed his fingers around hers, the cold seeping into his skin like a vow he couldn't unmake. And for the first time in years, the man known as the ICE executive felt something thaw. When he led her away from the locked shelter gate, he didn't yet know that this small girl, shivering beneath a broken streetlight, was about to unravel everything he thought he understood about success, responsibility, and the cost of looking the other way. But he knew one thing tonight: he'd heard something he could never forget. Snow trailed behind them as Adrian guided Mira into the small 24-hour diner tucked between a pharmacy and a pawn shop. The place smelled of burnt coffee and old vinyl, but it was warm, and right now, warmth was the only luxury Mira seemed willing to accept. She hesitated at the door, pressing her hand against the glass, as if the light alone might reject her. Only when Adrian gently nudged her shoulder did she finally step inside. Conversations paused. A few customers glanced up, eyes lingering on Mira's thin coat-tangled hair and soaked shoes. One man's brow tightened in disapproval. The manager behind the counter frowned. Mira shrank instantly, pulling her torn backpack against her chest like a shield. Adrian stepped forward. "A booth for two," he said. The manager didn't move. "Sir, we run a family-focused business." "Kids like what?" Adrian's voice was calm, but edged with steel. "Cold hungry." The manager swallowed, glanced at Mira again, then forced a tight smile. "Booth in the back." Mira followed Adrian as if her feet weren't sure they were allowed to touch the floor. When she slid into the booth, she pressed herself against the window, turning her face toward the dark street outside. She seemed more comfortable with the empty city than with people. The waitress came over with a menu, but before she could speak, Adrian handed it back. Hot soup, bread, and something warm for her hands. "Cocoa if you have it." The waitress softened. "Right away." When she left, Adrian turned to Mira. "You're safe here." Mira didn't answer. She was staring at her reflection in the window, at the little girl who looked like she'd been fighting a battle on her own for too long. Her fingers began twisting the frayed strap of her backpack. Adrian noticed the way she kept glancing at him as if waiting for the moment he'd tell her this kindness had an expiration time. He nodded toward the bag. "You keep holding that like it's important." "It is," she whispered. "It's everything I have left." "Can I see?" She froze. Her small shoulders rose stiff and uncertain. For a second, Adrian regretted asking. But slowly, carefully as if opening it might let something painful fly out, she unzipped the backpack. The first thing she lifted out was a stuffed bunny, once white, now gray from years of fear and travel. One ear hung by a loose thread. She cradled it gently. "His name is Willow," she said. "Mom said he keeps nightmares away, but he can't keep all of them away by himself anymore." Adrian didn't smile. Humor felt out of place. He only nodded. "He looks brave." Mira wasn't expecting that answer. She blinked, then carefully set the bunny on the booth seat. Next, she pulled out a pair of children's socks rolled together pink with faded stars. They were worn thin, the heels almost translucent. "These were clean," once she murmured. "Mom said I should keep them for good days. I didn't know when the good days would come, so I kept them anyway." Adrian felt something tighten in his chest. Then came a folded photograph. Mira hesitated before sliding it across the table. In the picture, she was younger, maybe 4, sitting on the shoulders of a woman with dark hair and tired but soft eyes. They were standing on a pier in Santa Monica, the ocean bright behind them. Mira's smile in the picture was brilliant. Her eyes in the diner were not. "That's my mom," she whispered. "Elena." Adrian held the photo gently. Where was this taken? California. Before she got hurt. Before everything got confusing. He wanted to ask what confusing meant, but Mira had already reached deeper into the backpack and pulled out something else, something that made the air shift around them. A hospital bracelet. Adrian read the name printed on the plastic tag. Elena Ruiz. Mira swallowed. "She wore it the night she told me to be brave." "Where is she now?" Adrian asked quietly. "I don't know. They said she had to go. They said she'd come back when she felt better." Mira pressed the bracelet to her chest, but she didn't. The waitress returned with soup and cocoa. Mira didn't touch the food at first. She simply cupped her hands around the warm mug as if thawing inch by inch. When she finally took a spoonful, she ate carefully, like she believed someone might take the bowl away if she finished too fast. While she ate, Adrian nudged the pile of papers she still hadn't unfolded. "What about these?" Mira tensed. "They're important. For Mom." I kept everything she touched. He opened the stack slowly. The top pages were hospital discharge forms. Beneath them were letters from clinic's notes scribbled by hand, and an application for an assistance program. But what caught Adrian's eye was the denial form stamped 3 times in red. Incomplete documentation, he read aloud. Missing insurer authorization. Mira didn't know what those words meant, but she knew what they cost. "We tried to go back," she whispered. "But they told us the program was ending. Mom cried that night. She tried to call someone. Someone from the company with the blue logo. But nobody answered." Adrian felt heat crawl up his spine, not anger at Mira, not even anger at her mother's situation, but at a memory. A board meeting. A budget review. A recommendation to discontinue a community medical partnership. A vote, his signature. He stared at the denial form again. Same blue logo. Mira's voice broke into his thoughts. "Do you think she's still looking for me?" Adrian opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He had answers for almost everything. Earnings calls, investor demands, financial projections, but not this. "I think he said finally your mother didn't stop loving you. Whatever happened, that part didn't change." Mira held the photograph again, smoothing the creases with her thumb. "I keep hearing her voice," she whispered. She said, "No matter what happens, I should hold on to the things that prove we're real." Adrian folded the papers, placing them gently back into her bag. "You're real," he said, "and your story matters." Mira didn't look up. "Some people don't think so. I'm not some people." She stared at him, then really stared as if trying to decide whether a man in a tailored coat could possibly understand a child's kind of fear. Something in his eyes must have convinced her because she didn't pull away when he reached across the table, covering her small hand with his. "You did the hardest thing anyone your age could do," he said. "You kept going." She swallowed. "What happens now?" Adrian took a breath. He didn't have a plan, didn't have a script, didn't have a checklist to follow. But he knew one thing. He couldn't walk away, not from her, not from the evidence of his own failure, not from the truth sitting across from him wearing borrowed courage and sipping cocoa too carefully. Now, he said, we start finding answers. Mira nodded once, trusting him in a way that made his throat tighten. The snow outside thickened, covering the sidewalks, the street, and the silent shelter gate where she had waited for help that never came. But inside the diner, in a cracked vinyl booth, something small and fragile began to shift like a door warming its hinges after a long winter. And Adrian understood with a clarity that felt both terrifying and necessary that this little girl's bag of secrets was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. The Child Protective Services building did not look like a place built for children. The gray concrete walls and flickering hallway lights made it feel more like an airport nobody wanted to land in. Adrian pushed the door open with one hand while keeping the other firmly on Mira's shoulder. She walked close beside him, her steps tiny, deliberate, as if every doorway felt like a test she had to pass. Inside, families filled the waiting area. Exhausted parents, clutching paperwork, teenagers staring at the floor, toddlers crying from lack of sleep. The air felt heavy, the kind of heaviness that settles over people who've run out of options. Mira immediately shrank toward Adrian's side, gripping her backpack so hard her knuckles turned white. "We'll just talk to someone," Adrian whispered. "Nobody's taking you anywhere." She nodded, though her eyes darted nervously toward a boy being led down the hall by a caseworker. He wasn't crying, but he wasn't walking either. He was being pulled. Adrian felt her shiver. A woman at the front desk didn't look up as they approached. "Name." "Her name is Mira," Adrian said. "I'm here to— Are you her legal guardian?" "No." The woman finally looked at them, her expression stern but tired. "Then you'll need to wait." She pointed toward an empty seat between a coughing man and a mother bouncing two crying infants. Adrian exhaled, guiding Mira toward the end of the bench farther from the noise. She sat stiffly, her small legs dangling backpack on her lap like armor. He leaned closer. "You doing okay?" She nodded, but she wasn't. Anyone could see that. A door opened, and a familiar voice called Mira Ruiz. A woman stepped out, Officer Grace Holloway. Tall, calm, steady. The same officer who had spoken to Mira weeks earlier when someone filed a welfare concern. Mira's fingers locked onto Adrian's sleeve, panic flashing across her face. "It's all right," he whispered, though he wasn't entirely sure. Grace approached with careful steps, crouching so her eyes met Mira's. "Hey there, I remember you. You were staying with the neighbor lady for a while, right?" Mira's mouth trembled. She didn't answer. Grace turned to Adrian. "I heard she was found alone near Harlem Haven. That's why I'm here. We need to make sure she lands somewhere safe." "Safe doesn't mean separating her from the only stability she's had in months," Adrian replied, steady but firm. Grace studied him. "And you are—" "The man who found her." "It doesn't make you family," she said, gently but directly. "I'm aware." He angled his body slightly instinctively, shielding Mira. "But I'm not walking away." Grace didn't argue. She simply nodded as if she had seen too many people walk away easily and wasn't used to someone refusing to. She led them to a small office where a CPS representative waited, a thin man with glasses too big for his narrow frame. Papers were stacked around him like walls. He began reading from a file. Child appears to have no confirmed relatives, no legal identification, and no fixed residence. Standard protocol would be emergency foster placement. "No," Mira whispered before he could finish. Please." The man looked up, startled by her voice. Adrian spoke measured but firm. "She's been moved enough. She needs stability. With all due respect, sir." The man said, pushing up his glasses. "We don't place children based on emotional attachments formed in a single night." Adrian's jaw tightened. "This isn't temporary for me." Grace watched the exchange, her expression shifting into something more complex, part sympathy, part caution. "Look," she said, "I know the system looks cold. Sometimes it is, but we're not trying to take her from you. We're trying to understand the situation." The CPS rep gestured to the backpack. "Does she have any documents? Anything confirming identity?" Mira carefully placed the bag on the desk, pulling out the hospital bracelets. The denial forms the photograph of her mother. Grace's face softened as she studied the items. The CPS rep sifted through the medical papers. "These hospital records are incomplete, and the insurance request rejected due to program discontinuation." Adrian felt his stomach twist. The blue company logo printed on the top corner was undeniable, a silent accusation pointing straight at him. If Mira noticed him tense, she didn't show it. She simply whispered, "Mom said we'd fix everything once she got better." Grace cleared her throat. "We have to ask a hard question. Mira, has anyone been taking care of you since your mom got sick?" Mira stared at the floor. "Sometimes. But nobody stays long." Her shoulders curled inward, as if bracing for shame she didn't deserve. Adrian knelt beside her. "You didn't do anything wrong. None of this is your fault." For the first time, Mira leaned into him, not out of fear but trust. Grace took a slow breath. "She's bonded to you. That matters." The CPS rep frowned. "Bond or not, guardianship requires a full process. Background checks, home review, interviews, then start them," Adrian said. "Today, you don't understand," the man replied. "You're a public figure, a CEO. Involvement could complicate everything." Adrian almost laughed, sharp, humorless. "Everything is already complicated." Grace stepped forward. "We're not ignoring what he can offer. But we need to be thorough. Mira deserves that." Mira reached for Adrian's hand. "Can I stay with you?" she whispered. "Just until Mom comes back." Silence spread through the room like a slow-moving wave. Adrian looked at her at the fear in her eyes, the hope she barely dared to feel. His voice was steady, but it carried something heavier than certainty. "You can stay with me," he said. "I'll be with you through all of this." She nodded, small but relieved. Grace turned to the CPS rep. "We can authorize temporary protective accompaniment. Child remains with Mr. Wolf under supervision until initial assessments are completed." The rep hesitated, then slowly nodded. "Given the circumstances, fine." But nothing is finalized. Adrian didn't care about final, he cared about tonight. He placed the backpack gently back into Mira's arms. "Ready to go." She nodded again, this time with a little more strength. As they stepped into the hallway, Grace watched them, her expression softening. "You're taking on more than you realize," she said quietly to Adrian. He looked down at Mira, who tightened her grip on his hand. "I know," he said, "and I'm not backing out." Grace nodded, almost smiling. "Good, because children like her don't need temporary." When they stepped back into the winter air, Mira looked up at the sky. Snow drifted down peacefully, nothing like the storm inside the building they'd just left. And for the first time that night, her shoulders relaxed, not completely, but enough for hope to slip in. Behind closed doors, decisions were made by paper and policy. Out here, under the soft glow of streetlights, Adrian could finally breathe. And Mira could finally believe she wasn't alone. The next morning brought a gray, tired sky, the kind that made New York feel heavier than usual. Adrian had barely slept. Every hour or so, he checked on Mira, making sure she was still breathing softly on the pull-out bed in his guest room. She clutched her stuffed bunny even in sleep, as if letting go might make the world disappear again. By noon, he and Mira were standing in front of Mount Sinai Hospital. The building felt imposing, but Adrian sensed answers inside answers Mira deserved, even if they hurt. She held his hand tightly as they walked in her steps, slow, wary of the unfamiliar hallways and the faint smell of antiseptic that clung to the air. A nurse at the reception desk looked up. "Can I help you?" "We're trying to locate medical records for a patient," Adrian said. "Elena Ruiz." The nurse hesitated, eyes flicking between Adrian's tailored coat and Mira's too small jacket. She softened. "Give me a moment." It didn't take long before a doctor stepped out from a side door, an older man, silver-haired, humble in posture. His badge read, Dr. Morales. He studied Mira with quiet recognition. "I remember this child," he said gently. "Your mother brought you here a few months ago." Mira's throat tightened. "She always said we'd come back when things were better." The doctor sighed, motioning for them to follow him into a private room. Elena was determined he began, strong even when her body was failing her. "What happened?" Adrian asked. "She came in after a workplace accident, a fall that caused internal complications. She needed follow-up treatment, urgently, but she didn't have the proper coverage approved." Adrian tensed. "Coverage was pending," denied Dr. Morales, corrected softly. "Repeatedly." He spread several documents across the table, copies of forms Adrian recognized even before he saw the logo. His company's. The blue crest in the corner seemed to glare back at him like a mirror of guilt. Mira leaned forward, touching the corner of one form with her small finger. "Mom said she signed everything they told her to." Dr. Morales nodded. "She did, but someone on the insurance side never processed the authorization. Without it, she couldn't receive the treatment she needed." Adrian felt the room tilt for a moment. "She tried to fix this," he whispered. "She tried harder than anyone I've seen in years," the doctor replied, "but she ran out of time." Mira looked up. Is she gone?" Her voice wavered on the final word. Dr. Morales crouched in front of her. "Sweetheart, your mother was very sick. She didn't leave because she wanted to. She was trying to get well for you." Mira pressed her lips together, fighting tears. Adrian placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. The doctor turned to Adrian. She asked about help programs, about shelters, about anything that would keep her daughter safe if she couldn't. Most of those programs were shut down last year. Shut down. The words hit like a blow. Adrian could picture the budget meeting the spreadsheets, the board members urging cuts. He remembered the CFO's voice. "These community branches are too costly." He remembered signing off. He had shut down the very system meant to catch people like Elena Ruiz. Did she leave anything for Mira? Adrian asked. "Any message, Doctor?" Morales reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope, worn edges bent Mira's name, written in shaky handwriting. "She couldn't finish it," he said softly, "but she asked us to keep it safe." Mira stared at the envelope as though it were fragile, precious. She didn't open it. She held it to her chest like a heartbeat she wasn't ready to hear. Adrian swallowed hard. "I need to know. Did the insurance denial cost her life?" The doctor didn't answer immediately. He looked at Mira, then back at Adrian. "I can't say it that directly, but I can say this: if she'd gotten treatment sooner, things might have been different." The quiet truth sank like a stone. Adrian had spent years believing in cost-benefit charts, financial projections, efficiency models. Standing here now, watching a child clutch her mother's unfinished letter, he understood the true cost of those decisions. He crouched beside Mira. "Your mom didn't stop fighting for you," he said. "Not for a single day." Mira nodded through tears. "She always said we'd have a home someday." Dr. Morales placed a gentle hand on Adrian's arm. "You're doing right by her," he said quietly. "Most people wouldn't bother to look for the truth." Adrian shook his head. "I'm not doing enough. You're doing something the doctor said. That matters." As they walked out of the hospital, Mira slipped her hand into Adrian's again. She didn't say anything, but the silence between them carried a weight he felt responsible for and determined to lift. Halfway down the steps, she whispered, "Do you think she'd be proud I'm still trying?" Adrian looked down at her, his voice steady. "I think she'd be proud you never stopped believing she loved you." "And you?" she asked softly. "Are you staying?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes, I'm staying." The wind brushed past them, cold, but not as sharp as before. Mira held her mother's letter close, and Adrian knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had helped close a door that should have stayed open. Now he had to open it again, no matter how many walls stood in his way. The boardroom felt colder than usual, though spring sunlight streamed through the windows overlooking Manhattan. Adrian stood at the head of the long table, hands planted firmly on the polished wood. Every board member was present, some anxious, some irritated, all waiting for him to explain why reporters were camped outside the building and why his name was plastered across morning headlines. One article lay open on the screen. CEO linked to closure of shelter where abandoned child was found. Adrian didn't flinch. "I take responsibility," he began. "Every decision, every cut, every consequence." A few murmurs rippled down the table. Victor, the CFO, leaned forward. "We can handle this quietly. Issue a statement about system failures. Distancing yourself is the safest route." Adrian shook his head. "She's not a system failure. Her name is Mira." Victor sighed. "This girl is turning public sentiment against us. You can't attach yourself to her." "I already did," Adrian replied. "The night I found her sitting outside a locked shelter, we closed." A silence fell, long, heavy, undeniable. He reached into his briefcase and placed Elena Ruiz's medical forms on the table. Her mother tried to get help. She was denied because we eliminated programs that would have kept her alive. There is nothing safe about hiding that. The room shifted. Conflicted looks, a few lowered eyes. Adrian continued, voice steady. "I'm reopening Harlem Haven. Fully funded, permanently, and we're restoring every community support initiative we shut down." One board member scoffed. "Do you know what that will cost?" "Yes," he answered. "More than money, but less than what it cost Mira." Victor pushed back from his chair, frustrated. "You're doing this because of guilt. I'm doing it because I met a child who waited outside a door I closed with my own signature." His voice softened. "I won't let another child wait like that." Another board member spoke quieter than the rest. "And what about the girl I'm seeking guardianship?" Adrian said. "Legally, permanently, if the court allows it." Gasps, whispers, disbelief. But Adrian didn't waver. He had been uncertain of many things in life, but not this. Within days, the story shifted from outrage to accountability, to something rare in corporate America: restitution. Volunteers offered support, local businesses donated supplies, and community members showed up to help renovate the shelter that had once been an empty shell. On opening day, a bright new sign hung above freshly painted doors: "No child waits outside." Children ran in the courtyard, staff welcomed families, and hope, stubborn, determined hope, filled the halls that had once stood silent. Mira stood at Adrian's side in a yellow dress gifted by one of the volunteers. Her hair was neatly braided, her cheeks fuller now, her eyes brighter. She held his hand tightly, but no longer out of fear, out of belonging. People greeted her gently, offering warm smiles instead of wary glances. She stayed close to Adrian as if anchoring herself to something she finally trusted. Across the yard, Rick, no longer dressed in a suit, but in a volunteer vest, carried boxes inside the shelter. His face carried the weight of remorse. When he approached Mira, he paused, kneeling so he didn't tower over her. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for everything your mother went through. For what I didn't do." Mira didn't fully understand the layers of guilt in his voice. She simply offered him a cookie from the tray she carried. "It's okay," she said gently. "This place is open now." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was grace. Victor arrived later with a truck full of donated coats. He didn't say much. He simply placed a hand on Adrian's shoulder as he passed. "You were right," he murmured. "Some doors shouldn't close." As the evening sun dipped low, painting the sky over Harlem Haven in soft gold, Mira tugged on Adrian's sleeve. "Can I see the playroom?" she asked. "Of course," he said. She looked up at him more serious this time. "Are you staying?" Even when things get hard. Adrian knelt to her level, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yes, Mira, I'm not going anywhere." She nodded, accepting the promise she once feared to believe. That night, as children laughed, as volunteers chatted, as warmth finally filled a place that had once been abandoned, Mira stood beneath the shelter's new sign. She traced the letters quietly with her fingers. "Mom would like this," she whispered. "A door that stays open." Adrian stood behind her, hands in his pockets, watching the girl who had changed everything without meaning to. "Yes," he said softly, "she would." Lights glowed from every window of Harlem Haven. A building resurrected, a promise reclaimed, a place where no child waited alone in the cold. Mira turned toward him, her smile small but sure. "We made it open again." Adrian felt something inside him settle, something that had been restless for years. "No," he said gently. "You did." And for the first time since that frozen winter night, the world felt a little less cold. The story of Adrian Wolfe and little Mira begins on a winter night, but its ending reaches far beyond a single season. What started as a chance encounter outside a locked shelter gate became a journey that reshaped not only two lives, but an entire community. Adrian, a man once defined by spreadsheets, efficiency models, and a carefully controlled distance from anything emotional, found himself face to face with the consequences of decisions he had never bothered to question. And Mira, a child who had learned to stay quiet, to take up as little space as possible, discovered that sometimes help does come, even when you've stopped believing it ever will. Their journey took them through cold hallways, government offices, hospital wards, and the shadows of choices made by people in power who would never meet the ones affected. Along the way, truths were uncovered. Truths about a mother who never stopped fighting a system stretched too thin, and a man who spent too long convincing himself that numbers mattered more than names. Through it all, Mira held tightly to the pieces of her mother's world, the bracelets, the letters, the photographs, small fragments that kept love alive long after circumstances tried to bury it. Adrian could have walked away. Many in his position would have. But something in Mira's voice, in the way she carried hope, the way other children carried toys, made it impossible for him to turn back. In her, he saw the child he once was, the one who had also waited for someone to choose him. And this time, he refused to let another child face that kind of silence. By reopening Harlem Haven and rebuilding the programs that had once fallen under the weight of budget cuts, Adrian didn't just create a building with open doors. He created a place where no child would have to ask the question that froze him that night. Where do kids go when nobody wants them anymore? Through every step, Mira transformed from a frightened girl clinging to a torn backpack into a child who laughed, played, and most importantly, believed she was safe. Their story isn't about perfection. It's about courage found in unexpected places. It's about responsibility redemption and the power of showing up when it matters most. Adrian didn't undo every wrong. He didn't rewrite the past. But he did what every adult should strive to do. He stepped forward, took ownership, and chose compassion over convenience. And in return, he discovered a purpose that went far beyond corporate success. For Mira, the lesson was equally profound. The world may be unpredictable, but one kind hand, one open door can change everything. She learned that her mother had never stopped loving her, and that sometimes strangers become the family life forgot to give you. She learned that love isn't measured in biology or paperwork. It's measured in the people who stay. And for us, the audience living our own complicated lives, this story carries a message worth holding onto. We all pass by moments, quiet moments, uncomfortable moments where choosing to stop to listen to help could change someone's entire direction. We rarely get dramatic reminders that our choices matter, but they do. Each of us has the power to be the person who opens the door instead of locking it, to be the voice that says, "I'm here, you're not alone." Adrian walked into Mira's life by accident. He stayed by choice, and that choice transformed both of them. If this story touched you, inspired you, or reminded you of the goodness we're all capable of, I invite you to join our community. Subscribe to the channel, support these stories, and help us continue bringing powerful, meaningful content to life. Your support fuels every future episode, every new story, every reminder that compassion is still alive in this world. Thank you for watching. Thank you for feeling this with us. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a moment of inspiration.
If you want this type of stories, then subscribe to Golden Chapter Whispers.